Hey family, before we begin, I need you to do something. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Your support fuels these stories. And hit subscribe, because what happens next will shake you to your core. Antonio Russo didn't know the quiet waitress serving his table had once been someone he destroyed. He was laughing, surrounded by his men, when she approached with wine. He didn't recognize her face. Why would he? 15 years ago, she had been a child. But she remembered everything. And tonight, in this expensive restaurant, she would begin taking back what he stole. Her name was Elena. And this was the night everything changed. Antonio Russo sat at the corner table like a king. His men surrounded him, laughing at his jokes, nodding at his commands. The restaurant was his favorite, the kind of place where power gathered and fear followed. Elena approached their table carrying wine. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. Inside, her heart was screaming. Finally, Antonio said without looking up. I've been waiting forever. She poured carefully. One glass, then another. You're slow, he said coldly. Are you stupid or just lazy? His men laughed. Elena said nothing. Antonio looked at her properly for the first time. His eyes were empty, cruel. You remind me of someone, he said. Someone weak. She met his gaze. Just for a second. Speak when spoken to, he snapped. You wretched waitress. The insult echoed. Other diners turned to look. Elena's face burned with humiliation. But she didn't break. She lowered her eyes and whispered, My apologies, sir. Antonio waved her away like trash. She walked back to the kitchen, trembling. Not from fear. From rage. Because Antonio Russo had said those exact words before. 15 years ago. To her father. Right before he killed him. That night, Elena stood in her small apartment staring at an old photograph. Her father smiled back at her, young and hopeful. He had owned a small construction company. An honest man in a dishonest world. Antonio had wanted the land. Her father refused to sell. You wretched builder, Antonio had said that day. You think you can refuse me? Elena had been 12, hiding behind a door, watching everything. Her father died 2 weeks later. The police called it an accident. A construction site collapse. But Elena knew the truth. She had heard Antonio's threat. She had seen the fear in her father's eyes. Her mother broke after that. She died quietly 3 years later, her heart simply giving up. Elena had been alone ever since. Working, surviving, waiting. Now, 15 years later, she was no longer a powerless child. She had spent years preparing, learning, watching Antonio from the shadows. She knew his businesses, his routines, his secrets. And she knew his greatest weakness, his pride. Tonight had been a test. He didn't recognize her. Good. That meant she could move closer. She folded the photograph carefully. I'm ready, Papa, she whispered. Elena returned to work the next evening. Antonio was there again. He came twice a week, always the same table, always surrounded by dangerous men. She served him quietly. He insulted her again. Called her slow. Called her worthless. She apologized. She obeyed. She became invisible. But while she poured wine, she listened. Antonio was angry that night. The shipment was late, he told his second-in-command, Marco. Someone's stealing from me. Marco looked nervous. We're investigating. Investigate faster, Antonio said coldly. Or I'll investigate you. Elena filed the information away. Shipments. Theft. Internal problems. Over the following weeks, she built a pattern. She learned Antonio's business operated from 3 locations. A warehouse near the docks, a nightclub downtown, and a legitimate shipping company that laundered money. She also learned something else. Antonio trusted no one completely. He kept separate records, backup plans, insurance against betrayal. That made him smart. It also made him paranoid. And paranoid men made mistakes. One evening, Antonio's phone rang during dinner. He answered immediately. "What do you mean it's gone?" he hissed. Elena refilled water glasses nearby, moving slowly. "Find it," Antonio snapped. "Tonight." He ended the call and threw his napkin down. "We're leaving." His men stood immediately. They left cash on the table and disappeared. Elena watched them go. Then she made a phone call of her own. Elena had an ally. His name was Father Giuseppe, an old priest who had known her father. He ran a community center in the poorest part of the city. "You're playing a dangerous game," Father Giuseppe said when she visited him that week. "I have no choice," Elena replied. The priest sighed. He knew her pain. He had buried both her parents. "What do you need?" he asked finally. "Information," she said. "About the people Antonio hurt. The families he destroyed." Father Giuseppe nodded slowly. Over the years, many victims had come to him for help. He kept their stories, their names. He gave Elena a list. There were 17 families. Some had lost businesses. Others had lost loved ones. All had been silenced by fear. Elena studied the list carefully. Then she began making quiet visits. She didn't ask for help. She simply listened. She let them tell their stories. And slowly, carefully, she planted a seed. "What if," she would say softly, "someone finally stood up to him?" Some people were too afraid. But others listened with hungry eyes. By the end of the month, Elena had built something invisible but powerful. A network of anger waiting for direction. Antonio Russo had made many enemies. He just didn't know they were gathering. Antonio's problems were getting worse. Another shipment disappeared. Money went missing from the nightclub. His men were whispering, questioning, doubting. He called a meeting at the restaurant. Elena served them personally. "Someone is betraying me," Antonio said, his voice like ice. "And when I find them, I'll make an example." Marco looked pale. "We've questioned everyone." "Then question harder." Elena poured wine, her face blank. But inside, she smiled. She wasn't stealing from Antonio. Not directly. But she knew people who were. Small thefts. Carefully timed. Nothing traceable to one source. It was working. Antonio was unraveling. That night, after the restaurant closed, Marco stayed behind. He approached Elena in the kitchen. "You," he said quietly. "You hear things." Elena looked at him carefully. "I hear nothing, sir." "Don't lie," Marco said. But his voice wasn't threatening. It was desperate. "Antonio thinks I'm the traitor. I'm not. But he'll kill me anyway unless I give him someone else." Elena studied him. Marco was afraid. Afraid men talked. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Tell me if you hear anything. Please. I have a family." Elena paused, then nodded slowly. "I'll listen." Marco left quickly, relief in his eyes. Elena washed dishes in silence. Marco had just given her something valuable, access to Antonio's inner circle, and proof that the organization was cracking from within. 2 weeks later, Elena made her first direct move. She placed an anonymous call to the police. She gave them an address, a date, and a tip about illegal weapons. The police raided one of Antonio's warehouses. They found nothing. Antonio had moved everything hours before. But that wasn't the point. The point was that someone had informed the police. Someone inside had betrayed him. Antonio's rage was volcanic. He gathered his men and demanded answers. No one had any. "It was Marco," someone whispered. Marco's face went white. "No. I swear." "You've been nervous for weeks," another man said. Antonio stood slowly. He walked to Marco and stared into his eyes. Are you the rat? No, Marco begged. I'm loyal. I've always been loyal. Antonio studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. I believe you. Marco exhaled in relief. Antonio shot him anyway. Once. Clean. Final. The room went silent. Let this be a lesson, Antonio said calmly. I don't tolerate doubt. Elena heard about it the next day. She felt no guilt. Marco had chosen his life. But his death served her purpose. Antonio's men were terrified now. Fear bred mistakes. Mistakes bred chaos. And chaos was exactly what she needed. Antonio began drinking more. Elena noticed it immediately. His hands shook slightly. His eyes looked tired. The control he prided himself on was slipping. One night, he came to the restaurant alone. No guards. No men. Just him. Elena approached carefully. Your usual table, sir? He looked at her. Really looked at her. Do I know you? He asked. Her heart stopped. No, sir. I've only worked here a few months. He frowned, still staring. Then he shook his head. You remind me of someone. I have one of those faces, she said lightly. He nodded and walked to his table. But throughout the meal, she felt his eyes on her. When she brought dessert, he spoke again. What's your name? Elena, sir. Elena, he repeated slowly. That name. She waited, holding her breath. But then his phone rang. He answered immediately, his attention shifting. The moment passed. Elena walked away, her legs shaking. That had been close. Too close. She had to move faster now. Before he remembered. Before he connected her face to the past. That night, she made another call. This time, to a journalist. She gave him documents. Photos. Evidence of Antonio's crimes. The story would publish in 3 days. And when it did, Antonio Russo's world would begin to burn. The article exploded. It named names, detailed crimes, included photographs. Antonio's legitimate businesses were exposed as fronts. His political connections were revealed. The city erupted. Police investigations launched. Partners distanced themselves. Fear turned to anger. Antonio's empire began collapsing. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But steadily, like a building losing its foundation. He knew someone had orchestrated this. Someone with access. Someone close. He called another meeting. This time, he looked at Elena. You, he said. Come here. She approached slowly, her heart pounding. You're always around, Antonio said. Always listening. Always watching. I'm just a waitress, sir. Are you? His eyes were dangerous. Or are you something else? The room held its breath. Then Antonio's lawyer burst in. The police are outside. They have warrants. Antonio stood immediately. His focus shifted. He looked at his remaining men. We leave. Now. They fled through the back exit. Elena was forgotten in the chaos. She stood alone in the empty restaurant, shaking. Not from fear. From victory. She had done it. She had brought Antonio Russo to his knees. But she wasn't finished yet. Antonio went into hiding. His businesses shut down. His men scattered. The police searched, but he had vanished. But Elena knew where he was. She had been tracking him for weeks through old connections, purchased information, careful observation. He was hiding in an abandoned building near the docks. The same docks where her father's body had been found. Elena stood outside the building one cold evening. In her pocket was a recording device. Evidence of everything. Confessions she had gathered, documents she had stolen, testimonies from families. She walked inside. Antonio was alone, sitting in the dark, holding a gun. I knew you'd come, he said quietly. I remembered. You're Roberto's daughter. Yes, Elena said. She wasn't hiding anymore. Antonio laughed bitterly. All this time. A waitress. Who would believe it? You destroyed my family, Elena said. You called my father wretched. You humiliated him. Then you killed him. He refused me, Antonio said simply. That was his mistake. No, Elena replied. Underestimating me was yours. She pulled out the recording device. The police are coming. I made sure of it. Everything you've done, everyone you've hurt, it's all here. Antonio raised the gun. Then I have nothing to lose. Elena didn't move. Shoot me. But you'll still fall. My story is already out there. Your empire is already gone. You've already lost. Antonio lowered the gun slowly. His hand was shaking. For the first time in his life, he looked small. You want revenge, he said. Take it. Kill me. Elena shook her head. Death is too easy. I want you to live knowing a waitress destroyed you. I want you to rot in prison remembering the girl you didn't see coming. Sirens echoed in the distance, getting closer. Antonio closed his eyes. Your father was weak. No, Elena said. He was good. You just couldn't tell the difference. The police arrived. They arrested Antonio without resistance. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He just stared at Elena as they led him away. She stood alone in the empty building, finally allowing herself to cry. Years later, people would tell the story differently. Some said Elena was an angel of justice. Others called her dangerous. But those who knew the truth understood something simpler. She was a daughter who refused to forget. A woman who turned humiliation into power. And a reminder that the people you overlook are often the ones who change everything. Antonio Russo died in prison 5 years later. Alone. Forgotten. Elena built a community center in her father's name. She never spoke about what she'd done. She didn't need to. Her revenge was complete. And sometimes, that's all the justice the world allows. Now I ask you, if someone destroyed your family, would you have the patience to wait 15 years for revenge? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful tales of justice and redemption.